Hi, very good morning. It's Gene from maverickstar. I was intending fully today to get an Earth Alpha at a glance put together for you guys, but if you see the weather that we're having outside here in the UK at the moment, you'll understand why I can't take any electronic equipment out there, because it's just raining. If it lets up a bit later on this afternoon, I'll get the equipment out there. We'll measure the atmospheric CO2 and oxygen and all the other things that we do, and I'll get that uploaded later on this evening for you. Was Keir Starmer listening to what I was talking about yesterday? Because is it a coincidence that today he's announced that he's going to scrap the green policies that, if he gets into power in the coming election, he'll scrap £28 billion. Now, I know you can say whatever you want in your manifesto, but there is no legal binding for you to actually bring those promises to fruition. So it could be just, talk, that might rub people up the right way, which might vote for him to get him in. But, for those of you that don't know who Keir Starmer is, he's the opposition party leader. So we've got the Labour, the Lib Dems and Conservative in this country, and he's the Labour leader. And I think, if you ask me, he's more conservative than Richard Sunak. If he was running the Conservative Party, would appear, in my view, a better candidate for that. So why he's running the Labour Party is bewildering. But I do like that tone of that. Scrap the 28 billion, scrap everything to do with the green policies, because we know it's funded on fake news and misleading information. We've covered this plenty of times, and it won't be the last time we talk about climate issues. If we could just as well as like what I was talking about yesterday, if we could just get rid of the MFI, don't pay them any more money, the United Nations, the European Union, the World Health Organization and NATO, if we could get rid of all them, we would not be just saving 28 billion, we'd be saving over 100 billions. And especially if we'd done that in a 3-year concession, you know what we might do? We've just cutting back on the spending on those organisations. We could probably get ourselves out of the debt that Britain is in right now. And I was listening to Robert Watkins in the comment section yesterday, and his comment was, that when we was talking about bankruptcy and, with regards to how much of a percentage would we class bankruptcy or insolvency with regards to the annual or the yearly GDP, the gross domestic produce. Well, let's face it, we're over 100%. I asked ChatGPT yesterday. I had a real good conversation. If you're interested in that conversation again tomorrow, I'll do it for you. It's always interesting listening to what the artificial intelligence has to say on this matters. And you can have a good debate, and you can get artificial intelligence to agree with you in some way. It's like it didn't like the term bankrupt, it said it's insolvency. And when I said this, listen to this, we've had Richie Sunak come out and say that he's on about reducing taxes. Well, think about this. If our debt is at 100% more than the yearly GDP, most people looking at those books would say Britain is insolvent. And then you have not Keir Starmer, you have Richie Sunak saying, oh, well, let's cut the taxes. If you're cutting taxes, how can you repay the debt that you've got already? Tell me that. So we've got two party leaders coming out with two ideas that, one, I don't think he'll follow through on the 28 billion axing of the green policies. And the other one, I don't think he'll do anything for us with reduction of the national debt. If you told, the rich boy clubs, the IMF, the EU, the United Nations, the World Health Organisations and NATO, and scrapped the green policies, you probably have 30% more to spend every year. Now, you could spend that on paying the national debt off, which would mean in 3.5 years the debt would be gone. That wouldn't be a bad thing. And you could probably spend a little bit more on the NHS. And, you could afford to pay your doctors a little bit more money. You could afford to spend some money on the infrastructure. You could spread this over the next 5 years. saving that 30%. What I'm saying to you is, it's all well and good when your country's doing economically great to have these little luxuries like the United Nations and the NATO and all the other things. But when your country's poor, you've got to take care of your responsibilities, and you've got to deal with this in an appropriate manner. If we've got debt, we've got to pay it off. And in the end, we'll be better off for doing that because we won't be paying interest on top of that debt. Now, we could go one of a few different ways. The artificial intelligence said, there's always a way that you can get yourself out of trouble if you're a country, especially if you're, a Western modern country. And that's true. But, the way I look at this, and we've all got these people in our streets, haven't we? They're the ones that spend beyond their means. They have the brand new Tesla. Then they have the patio and the conservatory built. And then they go on a holiday to Dubai on the credit cards. At some point you've got to start paying for these things. And at some point the expendable cash that you've got is getting smaller and smaller each time you are not being a little bit harder on yourself and budgeting a little bit better. And that's what we've had a failure of in this country. The country's industrial output, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure of this, has just declined over the last 20 years. And I think that that is to do with the fact that they're not investing in new businesses and seed and grassroots companies. And of course, if there's no new companies coming into the market with innovation, technology, and products mainly, not services, products, then the tax revenues raised are going to reduce, and you are going to start borrowing. This is something that has been not really, it appears to me, being looked at in any great detail. But, this is why people around the world are just sick and tired of it. Rather than address these policies and the problems that we all face, and this we're talking about the UK now, but you think any European country is different. Just look what Spain's government did yesterday, or allowed to happen. Spain produces citrus fruits, yet they said, you're not allowed to grow those anymore, and there was a ship that was being blocked, I think, at the port, that was importing citrus. First of all, if you've got a green policy, where's the environmental impact in actually having citrus fruits transported from wherever around the world to your country when you can produce them there? And then, you haven't got to add that carbon tax to your carbon debt problem that you've got with your country. Do you get what I'm saying? You've got to pay for that ship to be fueled and then transported. That's going to cost money. If it's got to go through a Suez Canal or the Panama Canal or whatever, I don't think anything's going through the Panama because they're under drought and they can't fill it at the moment properly, or very limited traffic's going through there, but another story. But the problem is, it's ludicrous, isn't it? And these are the things that these politicians from the European Union come out with. And we know they're not scientists, because if you look at what they talk about, it's absolute nonsense with regards to the environmental impacts and issues, because they just double talk. They say, like there's a good example, Spain. Let's import the fruit and then stop our farmers producing it, because our farmers produce more trouble. I think it was over pesticides, wasn't it? And that one politician, you clearly could tell he had no idea what he was talking about. He said, because pesticides means killing things, doesn't it? And that killing is a negative thing, isn't it? I had to put my head in my hands sometimes, because we're dealing with nursery grade intelligence, really. There are ways to address these problems, but they never seem to be utilised. And we know why. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of money laundering. Right now, world's in a right mess economically, and with all the wars that are happening, they seem to be expanding, and nothing seems to be reducing in these matters, which means things are getting worse and worse. So, we have to make some hard decisions, as we would do if we was a family trying to keep the roof over our head. If that meant curbing the spending for a little while, then that's exactly what's got to be done. If it means taking another job to, set aside that extra money to pay off the bills, then that's what you have to do. You have to take responsibility for your actions, and that's what we're seeing a lack of. And it's a real lack of leadership as well. You know, if you cannot address the problems you've got and you keep adding to them, then I'm afraid you're a poor leader in that respect. And that's what we've got too much of, and we've had too much of in the UK. And I'm pretty sure that this is something that is mirrored in all of Europe, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere. So, getting back to just one other thing, I mean, if you've got the time, I don't mind, you know, spending a few minutes talking about these things. The project that we've got on hand at the moment is trying to improve electrolysis so that we can tap that, you know, largest resource on our planet that we've got. And I'm sure that if, you know, they'd have invested the same amount of money of what they've invested in fusion technology, which hasn't worked yet for longer than a minute, before they have to strip the whole reactor down and then rebuild it back again to get another minute's worth. You know, if they'd have invested money in this, they would have had something now we could be all using and benefiting from. But we know that if this technology is successful, it'll end, you know, largely the petrol companies. But we will still need crude. You know, when I was studying back in 2000 at university, going through some of the books, they said that using crude oil for just fuel production was the biggest waste of it, because it has so many properties in the pharmaceutical markets and all the other technologies and sectors, you know, that using it for just burning in fuels for cars is waste. And, you know, if you could just use water, think about, you know, if you are an environmentalist and that is a big concern for you, just think about what is the byproduct of burning H2O? It is water. And you could condense that water very easily and reuse it. So you wouldn't be putting more water into the atmosphere, which would cause more problems already that we've got with the jet streams already being laden up with water. You know, but you could sort them out. So if we could, you know, come up with an idea to utilise this technology, get it working at some affordable level. We're not talking net zero, we're not talking 0 point here. We're not talking perpetual motion. Of course not. We know that there's a price to pay for anything that you get back out of something. If you put work in, you know, that work has to be added to the cost of getting that thing back out or the products back out. So we're not trying to, you know, create perpetual motion here. And like I said, you know, if you bombard water, salt water, with X-rays, the water catches fire. So we know it can be done. It's just a matter of getting it on an affordable scale where it can be utilised. I mean, if it costs 20% and you get 80% out of it, that's okay. If it costs 50% and you get 50% out, that's still okay. That's feasible, you know. So there is a margin for what we're trying to aim at there. We just want to make it affordable so that, you know, putting in these costs regards to whatever products or whatever we do at the beginning, we get it back out at the end, and it's well worth doing it. You know, it covers the X's at the front. So what we're trying to do, this is what we're trying to do. We're going to still use the electrolysis, but the electrolysis is going to be a second or third stage. We're going to be building a certain coil, because as you collapse a coil, it's going to look like a little bit like a pyramid, and the coil's going to go down into the point of the pyramid, but there's going to be a hole at the end of it. The reason for doing that is because you increase the electromagnetic pressure at the end of the coil when it's coming down, so that, you know, the pressure becomes more so at that point. We're going to use the misters that we've got, you know, these little devices that mist water, so that we're separating it. And there's a problem with doing it, separating water into a mist, is that you move the molecules apart from each other, and you also add air molecules in there. And the problem is with that is, how do you get electrolysis to take place when they're not, you know, it's not like water's constantly, touching the plates at both ends. So that's a problem that we're going to look at. But we're also going to add, using these are like flyback coils, and each one of these coils produces around about 25,000 volts, but at low milliamps. So you would get horrible shock off that, but it wouldn't be enough, I don't think, to kill you unless you had a weak heart. So we're going to create, with those flyback coils, ion wind, and we're waiting just for the delivery of the things that we're going to use to build the new electrodes at the bottom here. As soon as they come, then I can get on with building the stages that we're going to do. So we're not just using electrolysis, we're using ion seeded wind. So that wind's going to blow in with the mist, so there's going to be free ions in the mist. When it goes through the electrode plates, there's going to be the electrolysis taking place. We're also going to put it in a critical position, because we're going to crush those electromagnetic field. We're going to squeeze the field as well to create more pressure. So the water molecule is going to be really struggling to stick together, those hydrogen and oxygen atoms, hopefully, and we can get them separated. Now, each one of these methods isn't a big cost. I mean, this atomizer runs on 5 volts, hardly any milliamps. These, you can run each one of these on a 9-volt battery and still get a 25,000 arc of about 1 inch. The electrolysis is something variable we can do, and just because we're running things through a coil to the end, it doesn't mean that we're running large quantities of energy through that coil. So it's going to be interesting, these experiments. And again, I said to you, I'll throw everything at it at what I can until I get bored of doing it, or you've had enough of seeing these failed experiments. But just why shouldn't we? What else are we doing at the moment with our time, or my time? So why not? If these things aren't bankrupting me, then I don't mind certainly putting the time in and trying new things out. I can guarantee you the sequence that we are going to go through with this new generator, I guarantee it's never been done before. I mean, just think about the 4 combinations of different technology that we're using right now. They weren't around at the same time years ago. So, we're using the frequency generator for the electrolysis. We're using a certain amount of information that we now know on coils. So we're going to design this coil which goes down into a point, crushes the pressure in that point, with regards to electromagnetism in that field, or squashes the field lines down very tight. And then we're going to bombard it with ion wind as well, and we can create quite a bit of ion wind with these flyback coils. We can create probably 3 mile an hour wind, or probably 10 grams of thrust. So it's quite enough. I think it's quite enough to see if the experiment works or not. I mean, what we want at the end of it is, by the time the water molecules go through all these different stages, it's at the end be separated and be burnable. If we can do that and do it at low cost, then we've broke the back on this problem, and on a lot of the problems that the world faces. In the industries need energy, and when you look at countries like China, they've got on their bench now to build, I believe what someone said the other day, another 600 coal power plants. And there's another reason for us not to bother in the UK with the world's green policies, because we can cut back on everything in this country. Like one of you said yesterday, we're still going to amount to 1% compared to 80% of the emissions that China puts out. So why should we save that 1% and put ourselves through all that trouble as well? And why should a lot of other countries? If it was the case and humans had damaged the environment, well, and the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase was a big issue, then we've already tipped the scales, because we've been at 1.5 for the last few years already. So you know, I think it's time to put this to bed. It's only going to be taking money out of the criminals' pockets anyhow in these companies like, you know, the World Health Organization, and, you know, whoever comes up with these crazy policies like the politicians in the United Nations and the European Union, you know. So yeah, that's where we're going to go with the project that we've got on hand. And also we'll keep you informed, as we do, with the magnetic reversal that is currently taking place, which I think should be talked about way more than what it is currently being talked about. Okay guys, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for your time. Link down there if you want to help support us. You know, these little things that we use and, you know, we buy for these projects do cost money. They are necessary, and I know it doesn't look like it, but there are probably thousands of pounds worth of equipment that we couldn't do what we do here at this observatory if we didn't have them, and they cost money. So if you can chip in a few bucks, that's great, but don't break your bank. So take care of yourselves, your loved ones. I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.